Awesome. Now, Alicia, I mentioned a little bit about you, and perhaps you'd like to fill us in a little more on your roots and how you became an expert in all of these fields. So, Alicia, how did it start for you, please?
Okay, well, thank you. That's a great question, and there certainly is a story that comes with this. But I actually became an expert in the field of being a cross-industries entrepreneur from a very non-traditional and non-linear process because I became an expert of my lifestyle and also my entire evolutionary process. And I learned how to use it and serve and transform multiple niches. So I sort of developed a new standard as a pioneer leader and created a new niche or an industry of my own that involves utilizing all of who you are or several areas of your life to serve in any area that you feel guided to add value to. And to preface how my journey actually began was my evolutionary entrepreneurial journey began in 2007 in December, and I was preparing to relocate from Huntsville, Alabama, to do a lateral move from Phoenix to Phoenix, Arizona, with the company Family Christian Stores, where I actually served in the position as a high-level senior sales manager, and I was also planning to relocate at that time to attend Phoenix Seminary for graduate studies in leadership development. Well, Tony, I had all of my plans in place, and then once I left, things began to shift, and some divine editing took place, and I was guided to actually go to my hometown in Columbus, Georgia, before going to Phoenix. And what I didn't know was that there was going to be several years before I actually ended up moving to Phoenix, and I was being repositioned to start preparing to be a life purpose strategist with a concentration in leadership transition coaching for women, and also in the area of spiritual entrepreneur development. So, Tony, I was excited about becoming a life strategist and also helping others to connect with their life purpose because I had actually developed a great track record over the years for aligning myself and others with their life purpose and their career paths, their education, their spirituality, whatever was next for them, Tony, I was sort of that connection guide for that to happen. So as I mentioned, it was exciting to begin the process of making this into a profession or even a ministry. But what I didn't know at the time was that entering into this type of conscious entrepreneurship was really the beginning of what would be sort of a series of evolutions and transformations and also, Tony, dark nights of the soul, which were designed to rebirth me into really a whole new entity as a person and as a professional. So I did launch my first coaching and consulting practice in January of 2009, and it was called The Bridge Connection. And it had a primary focus for connecting women leaders with their next levels of purpose and also reinventing themselves as spiritual entrepreneur. And also if they were wanting to make life or business transitions, then I was able to help facilitate that process for them as well. So once that small practice was up and going, Tony, I also created a service that was called Many M-I-N-I Ways to Abundance, which sort of had a primary focus for connecting emerging leaders through inner game mastery with their true abundance. And also, the more I worked with others, I also saw sort of the need, Tony, to develop a small marketing annex platform so this could help individuals who were new to the conscious or solo entrepreneur arena so they could learn how to do online and offline marketing because as we know that marketing, the arena of marketing as it relates to being a conscious entrepreneur is very different than the traditional marketing that we see or we experience in corporations or even organizations. So having that platform for them to begin learning how to make the transitions of learning how to become their own sales and marketing department was a component that I felt was really necessary to add to the spiritual entrepreneur development. And also, Tony, I was utilizing my media communications background, and I used online radio marketing to support my business, and then I also helped to train others in that area as well. So I will share that I experienced some successes with those small businesses, and also, like any other entrepreneur in the first 3 to 5 years, we have those ups and downs that can happen, or the feast and famine, especially as it relates to the coaching or the conscious entrepreneur arena. So I experienced those, and I experienced also some burnouts, and even developed, Tony, a series of health crises. So some of my health crises didn't just develop just based on my stress and my burnout, but also it was in relation to environmental toxins and unseen airborne pollutants that also contributed. So by the year 2011, I had entered what I call sort of a human cocoon experience, and within that was the dark night of the soul, and I ended up experiencing a dark night of the soul in my finances, and also my health challenges, they still remain. So I'll be honest with you, I felt really disconnected during that time and disjointed from reality. But actually what was happening was that there was a newer and truer expression of who I was that really wanted to emerge, Tony. So what happened was I started to sort of break down like a caterpillar within a cocoon or a chrysalis, and this was designed for me to begin to reformulate into a higher authentic expression as a person and as an entrepreneur. So during that time, I slowed down, I started to get present, and I was just allowing myself to really shift from being this human caterpillar, so to speak, in life to becoming a divine butterfly. And it was really time for me to finally shed away what was no longer relevant for who I was becoming. And so I really had to get present and pay attention to what life was speaking to me about what I needed to let go of, and also the areas that really, really needed renewal. So this process also consisted of dismissing my spouse, and also he had not been supportive and made things extremely difficult for our family, which included 2 children. And also during that time, I had to let go of certain friends, disconnect from family members and even colleagues. And also I had to even let go of certain business frameworks that were really no longer serving or supporting my highest and best good for the process that was emerging. So it really was a time for me, Tony, to reconnect to my true self and my higher purpose for being an entrepreneur at this phase of my business evolution. And I was being guided to write and become published during that time, so I actually became published. I was a first-time published author, and I was really proud of that. And I also started training others how to write and become published as well. So even within this process, as things were evolving, I actually started phasing out my traditional coaching practice, and I began sort of renovating the way that I was doing business. And also, Tony, I was rebranding myself to become a pioneer entrepreneur, because there was this deeper part of me that wanted to bring forth all of my life mastery. And also I had been cross-trained in so many different areas, or, my profession, and all of those areas wanted to be showcased and utilized in a very unique way. So I was being called to become sort of a master and an authority of my entire life which would later sort of position me to become a transformational authority in several arenas. So I started operating, Tony, at that time of what I was calling spiritual or conscious multiplicity and being a multiplicity entrepreneur, which, of course, in an arena that has a paradigm of being focused on one niche, was really not understood because it could be misinterpreted as trying to serve too many niches without a clear focus. So what I began to do was, from late 2012 to early 2014, I sort of came off of the traditional entrepreneurial grid, and I began changing the rules, Tony, of how I was going to start pioneering a new industry standard for serving multiple niches with ease and effectiveness. And so I was in my entrepreneurial cocoon, and I was starting to really develop the next phase of who I was and how I was going to show up as this pioneer entrepreneur who could use all of my life and build business frameworks that could facilitate my new expression as a leader and as an entrepreneur of what I call the Total Me empires, so that I could serve several niches with a chief primary focus of transformation as a transformational cross-trainer. So I really felt that I was called to demonstrate this expression to show entrepreneurs that they could take the limits off of how they would show up and make their impact and even their income. If they wanted to up-level and elevate their income brackets, they could create ways to sort of repurpose themselves and begin serving in other venues. And so I went through a